Good afternoon, folks. Well, there's been a very interesting interview in Australia from a then serving acting senior sergeant called Krystle Mitchell. Brave lady, a moral lady, ethical lady, without a shadow of a doubt. And this is what is required in order that the police and the public don't lose the connection that they have. Because what's clear from this interview is that within the police forces in Victoria, in Australia, the majority of police are actually not happy with these orders that they're being given because they're not moral, they're unlawful, and in many cases, they're illegal, what's actually going on with the police. And of course, we don't see that when we're watching these videos from around the world. We just see the idiots amongst the police attacking members of the public with ridiculous brutality. But what she does get across is some very interesting points in relation to who is actually commanding. So if we just kick it off with just the intro here, where it's basically, this sets the scene, really, because, let's get this correct. The constabularies were set up in England under the guise of Robert Peel, and they created 9 principles of law enforcement. Now, 12, 13 years ago, we found Victoria's in Melbourne, Australia's actual 9 principles format, because we couldn't find it anywhere here, because obviously in Blighty, they've removed all this stuff to put in this bankrupt administration law post-World War II. Well, of course, the bankruptcies went on in the 30s, then they had the war, changed everybody's idea of what was supposed to be, and after the war, they launched the social system, they launched the NHS, etc. So you can see that the end of the Second World War was the installation of what they created with the bankruptcies in the 30s, the putting the birth certificate on the stock market to trade it. And here we are today in all this debt. Well, this is exactly the reason why. So when we're looking at the policing, over here in Blighty, they had to remove all semblance of what the constabulary was before the Second World War. And that was done to perfection here, So just by watching this lady and listening to what she has to say, we learn a lot of things. More importantly, that this Dan Andrews, who's got nothing to do with the realm, etc., the law, this guy's fully 100% corporate. And Dan Andrews is dictating terms to the constabulary. And the terms that are being dictated by the corporate is everything that we don't like. The same here in England. Your MP is responsible for that side of things, the physical, commercial side of your town, your area for which they are the MP. Now, for spiritual, you go to the priest, or whichever is heading the parish, the church that it's the parish. That priest is responsible for your supposedly for your spiritual sustenance, and that everything's going according to how it should be. Yeah, so that's the way the system was set. That's been uprooted post Second World War deliberately, so we'd accept this new garbage of slavery for those who were still at primary school level. We can see clearly from this video that the problem is that no longer are any forces or organizations operating under the corporate positions of power. So Daniel Andrews in Australia, the Police and Crime Commissioner here across England, they're the boys pushing the corporate agenda. And as we've revealed in previous videos, the chief constable of your constabulary is chosen by the corporate boy. And the rules of that choosing is that the incumbent chief constable will do exactly what is told to him by the police and crime commissioner. So there is your higher level shift of control. So that takes the police off the realm and law and the rules or the 9 principles that govern that. And now all our civil operations are operating to the bankruptcy administration policy, which the government then claims to be law. Well, it's only law in the sense that it is actually a contract between the government and you, because here we are governed with consent, and we're not consenting to this, but because people don't understand what was and now what is, so that we don't understand what is as now it's taken over what was, puts all of us in a standpoint of frustration. And you are then just listening to the garbage coming out of the media, out of the politics, etc., etc., and all those that then repeat that garbage. We're at a loss. So this video, this interview, she's really good at pointing out the issues within the police, state, etc., and how this shift of operating as a service for the public, or the communities they like to use, which we've also discussed, is double-edged, because you think they're speaking of you as a community, they're actually speaking of the stakeholder community. Okay, so it does show as well in this video that Acting Senior Sergeant Krystle Mitchell isn't fully savvy with the reality of what was and what's changed, though she does a great job of giving us what it is we actually need to know to start the path to reckoning with what it is that's changed, that's put us all in a position now where people think they have to obey these people in uniforms, even though they're acting in almost the inverted powers that are allotted to them within law. Yeah, because they're not on law, they're off law, they're on policy, and they call it law. Okay, and that's, we've discussed many times, is because you've been shifted off man into person. You've been shifted off person as credit account in support of Rome to preach the Gospels. But of course, Rome doesn't preach the Gospels. Rome preaches authority of its own institution while clambering together tons and tons of money to itself. Just read a report from America where 3 trusts, Vatican owned, have been buying up all the rental properties in America and kicking out all the tenants. It broke down the sort of protocols that the Vatican had issued in relation to how to deal with these people. You just got thrown out without issue. So you can see there that the Vatican now is doing nothing it should be, nor is it, more importantly, carrying out the mandate that was sort of given as a consent for that first title when you registered your offspring, and then basically gave license for the church to preach the Gospels on your behalf, not collect money, not buy up property, etc., etc., and then kick you out. So you can see that the whole system now is operating contrary. It's working against the West in that sense. We'll not run over all that again, but let's just start and have a listen to what Krystle has to say.
Why perhaps police either feeling more emboldened to act the way they are in relation to these show directions is because of the messaging that comes from Dan. He's not...
From Dan? You guys don't listen to Dan, you listen to Shane, right?
Well, everybody listens to Daniel Andrews. He's the Premier of our state and he tells us what to do on a daily basis.
Premier of the state. Okay, now these are city-states. Now, city-states, you can take them back to Sumer, Babylon. Yeah, the Greeks operated the city-state method. Socrates, Plato, and the pupils of both of those were fighting against democracy, against the idea of city-states, because they made very clear The end product of democracy is dictatorship, because the corporations will take over those systems. And because you've got a democratic system where 51% of the population say, we want this bunch of rogues in, 49% of the population are pissed off. Pissed off and not playing. You've got division. You've got division all day long, and it's not going to go away. And when the other side gets his play, you've still got 51% saying, yeah, we like this bunch of tossers, and 49% saying, no, we don't like it. You've got consistent, eternal division set in that system called democracy. So this is what Socrates and Plato were moving against. And you can take the what ran that system was the oracle. So that, you know, the psychics, you were always dependent on a priesthood to tell you which move to make. And of course, you had to give the priesthood a shitload of cash first as well, and tell them your plans. So this priesthoods back then, this is how they ran things, because they knew everybody's business. And if the one that paid the most would get the most help from the priesthood, which operated, you might say, through monasteries or whatever, temple, etc. You get in the system. So there's a demarcation between morality or religion, the doctrine, and the religion. The religions are a completely different animal, you know. And if you're sat pretty, no matter what religion you're in, thinking that just by believing or claiming to be Christian, Muslim, Jew, Buddhist, blah, 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 it means shit. It means shit in relation to you being on the correct way of existing in this life. All it means is you've offered up your energy to this system now running whatever it is you're claiming to be. And as we've just looked with for instance, so you've got the Vatican buying up rental properties in America and kicking everybody out deliberately, and putting immigrants in, which is exactly what they're doing here. They took the housing stock off the taxpayer, put it into the hands of the trust they control, put everything dependent on gas to exacerbate this coming gas issue we're going to have. Like the other week, on the morning they praised Russia for being the provider of all our gas, and then in the afternoon accused Russia of assassinating these two people with polonium-210. You can see the contradiction there. Morning, it's great, Russia's giving us all this gas, blum blum, let's piss them off. Yeah? Can you see how this is the corporate game? This is how the corporate keeps that division going, keeps you all confused, and then it's essential that you're going to do what they say, because they're the only idiots offering any kind of remedy. And the remedies are always to their benefit. They're never to ours, they're never to the roads, they're never to your communities. You know, they're always all they're doing is stripping you of power in your communities, stripping you of the ability to trade through taxation, through rents, through all this garbage that they keep throwing on you. And this is at council level. You know, so what we basically, from that beginning of what she's saying, is that we can ascertain that all our supposed forces, operations, organisations that we class as our civil system are in fact now dancing to the voice of the corporate. Okay, and in Australia's case, it's Dan Andrews. Okay, over here we'll be looking at the PCC, who operates with the city mayor. Yeah, so you've got the city mayor, you've got the PCC, you've got your chief constable. That is how the corporate system has took over the constabularies, which is law enforcement. So they've completely took over that. They set up their own private bodies like the SIA, who are licensing all sorts of degenerates and calling them security, to be called on as and when. You know what I'm saying? They've got them in the football, they've got them in the concerts, they've got them in everything now. Private, still owned. So you've got the city mayor, he has control over all the SIA boys and girlies, and he's fully controlling the chief constable and ensuring that the chief constable moves always the constabulary into the ideology coming out of the city mayor through the PCC. Australia, it's Dan Andrews. Corporate boys telling your police service how it is, and insisting they act contrary to the ethics and the morality, but more importantly, the law under which they are mandated to operate by the nation. So that's the people, okay? So here she is now describing exactly what we've just discussed in relation to the divide that's going on between the populations and the police because of the corporate influence.
I don't know how closely tied Shane Patton is to Dan Andrews and how that relationship works in terms of there being a separation of government and police.
It seems to be breaking down.
And it really does seem to be that relationship has become more close and more comfortable than the community should be happy with. I think that there's supposed to be that separation.
I put it to Kel Gleeson, the former chief commissioner. I said, people are seeing Vicpol as an extended arm, a political arm of the Andrews government.
Yeah.
To my shock, he said, yes, I think that's correct. They are.
Okay, so first you've got to understand then that the governments are all bankrupt. All the signature governments to the United Nations are bankrupt. So in essence then, the United Nations, you could say, on behalf of the banks, is administrating bankruptcy. So from that then, it gives the United Nations the power to reallocate wealth from the first world to the third world. It allows the third world to intrude on the first world, because this is classed as administrating the bankruptcy. So all governments signed into the United Nations are bankrupt, and what they're classing as law is in fact policy, and it's bankruptcy policy, okay? So because of those signatures to the United Nations, all our nations are being carved up. When something goes bankrupt, you fold that company and all contracts are off. So really, we should be pushing for the UK government to be folded. Yeah, and we start again. On all contracts already signed, this is to NATO, this is to United Nations, this is all the nonsense that the RIIA has got us into with the CFR, Club of Rome, which is your environment and climate. All the contracts they have with China when we moved our industry from the West into China, yeah, and even big parts of India. Those contracts are null and void because they've been carried out by successive bankrupt governments. So now Krystle is going to discuss what was actually going on with her as man, female. What was going on inside of her before she decided to take this leap? Because, of course, she's been with the police for 16 years. It's a long time. That's a career. And pretty obvious that this girl is a smart cookie. Not only is she a smart cookie, but she was being promoted because that was being acknowledged. And so this is basically... So, okay, we all have this going on within us. All of us. It doesn't matter who you are, what position you think you hold in society. It doesn't matter. We are all equal under the laws as set by the creator of this place for how we act in this place, this creation. And because if you're not acting according to those rules, you are in the world. And the world, of course, was given to the antagonist, who is trying to capture souls and take them away from the creation and the idea of it, okay? So this... it doesn't matter who you are, what your occupation is. Right now, if you're being told to do things that are contrary, to your rules of the organisation you're in, but more importantly, to the morality of the situation, and then thirdly, is it lawful? Then this is exactly what should be going on inside of you. And if it isn't, you really need to be worried about where you are as a critter in this amazing realm we call the earth. Because if it's not going on in there, then you've lost something serious inside yourself. And I would suggest to you that you might want to reference and recognize that you are in the world. You are not on the earth. Okay? So this is what should be going on inside you. And, dependent upon what's strongest in you will determine what path you take. Do you carry on sucking the shit out of it, buckling down to it because you're afraid of it, or do you reckon with yourself and realise that, hang on a minute, I'm here, I exist, I have a moral structure, I know what's right and I know what's wrong, and there's no fucking way on earth am I taking that shit or going to express that kind of behaviour against the very people that pay my wage. Yeah? So this is what should be going on inside you, regardless of what occupation you are currently operating as. Okay? So this is what she has to say.
And then get into why I came here, because there was a big, thought process and battle of morals and integrity within me about what I wanted to do and how I see my organisation being used during this pandemic, and it troubled me greatly. I've been in the police force for 16 years and I currently work at Gender Equality and Inclusion Command. It's the best job I've ever had in Victoria Police. I love it. I love my job. I love what I get to do for the organisation in terms of creating an equitable and fair workplace for everybody. My bosses are great. My work is great. I couldn't be happier in terms of the work that I do on a daily basis. But behind that is all of my friends that are police officers that are working the front line and are suffering every day, enforcing show directions that the vast majority, or certainly a great majority, don't believe in and don't want to enforce. And
do you mean, when you say majority, do you mean more than 50%? Literally, the definition of majority? Because I'm trying to figure out this, how many. Because you can't, people don't understand the gravity of what you're doing today. You're not allowed to do this.
No.
And so we can't know if your colleagues are 20% loving it, 80% loving it. I don't know.
Well, I haven't taken a poll, and I don't think Victoria Police would dare take a poll either. Yeah. But you are right. The consequences of me being here today is that I will be resigning from Victoria Police effective the end of this interview.
Wow.
Because the consequences of me coming out publicly would be dismissal. So I'm choosing to quit, and I'm quitting because I can't remedy in my soul anymore the way in which my organisation that I love to work for is being used, and the damage that it's causing in the reputation of Victoria Police and the damage that it's causing to the community. My partner and I were out walking during our 2 hours of exercise on the weekend, and there were police everywhere. I live in the city. And there was just police everywhere, doing their reassurance patrols, which they're not reassurance patrols. You're not reassuring anybody in the community. You're scaring people in the community that there's that many police out in the city, trying to stop mass gatherings or what have you. And the police don't want to look you in the eye. You don't want to look the police in the eye. There's this air of uncomfortability about it all.
Is that new?
It is. It absolutely is new. I used to love doing foot patrols. I loved it. It was such a great way to connect with community.
So you can see the shift from serving the public into this enforcing of authority is being recognised by the police themselves that it's actually skewing the community. She said clearly, the police won't look you in the eye and you don't want to look them in the eye. And I have actually noticed that myself, because I want their eyes. All I want, if I'm talking to somebody, I want your eyes. I want to see what's going on, because that's where I see everything. It doesn't matter what coming out your gob. Your eyes are telling me everything I need to know. So I do find their eyes, and I have found that some of them are reticent to actually give you the eyes because they're doing wrong. They know they're doing wrong. So this is the way we, the public, can start to discern which coppers out there are just low-grade thugs, and they're happy to do this, and which of them are actually uncomfortable. Because if they're uncomfortable, then you need to change tack in how you deal with them, perhaps, to remind each of you, both man, you both have the same concerns about the life. We forget. It's easy to forget in today's furore how decisions we make today in relation to what we're prepared to do to further this nonsense, the end result is what we're building here is for our children. And if you're of an age, your grandchildren. Are you really so self-absorbed, self-righteous, zero morality or ethical concept within you? Are you really at that point now where all you care about is whatever it is you're doing for this machine and giving absolutely no consideration to your offspring? And that perhaps if you are giving consideration for your offspring and thinking that what you're doing is the right thing to do, then you really need to start to recognize that there's something seriously flawed in your spirit. You are not seeing things correctly. This nonsense that's building now is going to be a prison for the future, for everybody, all living souls. You know, that's where you should be at if you are contemplating what it is you're doing. Is it right or wrong? You know, there is no in between on that. It's absolute. And as I said earlier, if you're not thinking in these terms, then there's something seriously wrong with you. Seriously wrong with you, and you shouldn't be in any position that gives you some kind of influence over the public good. Because what you're doing is going against the public good. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? You know, we're at that point now where we have to be serious about these concepts. You can't just keep pretending it's not happening. If you are thinking like that, there's something seriously wrong with you, and you're going to destroy the future of your offspring, of your grandchildren, yeah, your line. And you're okay. So now we start to get an insight into Sergeant Krystle Mitchell's mindset. So this is what she has been educated to. It's what she's been trained to be. So we can start to see now the difference in what is law and what is a corporate agenda. Now, of course, what's clear here, and I'm not in any way besmirching Sergeant Krystle, but what you can glean from this is the mindset that's coming through even with this young lady is that some of the corporate ideas are okay, because she's making it clear now that she worked on one specific or two specific corporate agendas here, but doesn't see that in and of itself is a breakaway from the original 9 principles of law enforcement and or what the police are supposed to do and what they're not to do. Okay, but she's not aware of that. So we can see that it's been a creeping dismantling of the existing formats which kept the nations together, as the corporate side of things has started to incorporate itself as the mandate. And specifically here, we're talking about the gender equality, okay? And we won't say we all know, but majority of people that are aware know exactly what this agenda really is all about, okay? It's in the main to sanction the complete breakup of the idea of family. Okay, that's what it's for. That's its entire intention, is to prevent the idea of a family unit from ever coming back into the future. Okay, so I'm not dissing Sergeant Krystle here, but I'm just pointing out how, because she's come up through this new programming, because she's only a young lass, that even what's thought to be acceptable from a young lady who's clearly ethical and moral and does have a grasp on what they should and shouldn't be doing, is still accepting of one of the major agendas in the disintegration of the family unit. So this is quite interesting. So just listen to what she has to say.
Been working, so Gender Equality and Inclusion Command is like a corporate area of the Victorian Police Force. And prior to that, I worked at Family Violence Command, I worked at Professional Standards Command, and those are corporate areas within the organisation. But throughout that entire time, I also did frontline duties.
So is she including family again? Can you see? And she accepted them. All of those three are corporate in their nature, all aimed at the breakup of the family, which has been going on since the end of the Second World War. You know, you got contraception, then you got free love. Okay, the family unit's not standing a chance here when mum and dad's off swinging and Fleabags are there being left with all sorts of babysitters who are doing all sorts of nonsense. You with me? That was the beginning of it. So the 60s, the baby boomer generation were loaded up with this stuff. Then the TV just gave them titillation, you know, carry-on films. As much as I enjoyed all this growing up, when you stand back and actually look at the overall agenda that was going on from every orifice of media, you know, TV, the entertainment, songs, all bombarding the baby boomer generation with free love. Okay? So contraception, you get free love, and then you get abortion. Yeah? So just look at these three things there in relation to an agenda, being part of the same agenda. You with me? It's all right to have an affair. If you get pregnant, you can abort it now. So before that, it's you can prevent yourself getting pregnant, so you can do what you want. And then the next one is, well, it's all right if you make a cock up, we can just kill it. But you're a killer. We'll encourage you to kill your baby, and we'll do it for you. Okay, you see what I'm saying? And then the finale. Well, let's not say the finale, but the penultimate was the promotion of homosexuality. Now, let's not toss about here. If it was not for the females, homosexuality would never have ever have been allowed into the public platform. It's the females that drove that. Okay, why, I don't know, but we do know females are susceptible to fantasy, you know. And if they're looking at men and think, oh, look, they want the females. Yeah, no. We don't have to go into detail about it. And I know that females are just not prepared to accept this, but that's fine. I don't actually give a toss. But one day you're going to realise what you've done, whether you're still awake and kicking or you've passed over and you're being shown what a complete tit you've been in helping to undermine the very thing you're here for, which is to nurture the next generation. You know, that's the feminine trait, to nurture. I don't care what anybody says, you will not create any life or offspring by sticking it up the shit pit. Okay? It's sterile. It's sterile act. All right? So let's not beat about it here. That's a fact. So you've got contraception, free love, abortion, homosexuality, leading ultimately to exactly what this girl's talking about, which is gender equality, which leads into gender confusion as accepted and real. Everything is about destroying the family unit and then, more importantly, to eradicate the idea off the face of the earth because the world has taken its place. Do you get what I'm saying here? It's so... And this young lady, as great as she is also helping us to grasp how, through this programming over this last 30 years, that things that shouldn't be accepted are accepted. And this is... So you've got to go back. So we're listening to what she's saying now in relation to this immediate shift from service to force, but it's how did we get there? Yeah, and that gender, all this nonsense is a major aspect of why we've got to this point now. And I don't expect this young lady to grasp that at this point, but it doesn't matter. You know, this is what we say about it's when you start to actually open your mind properly and your heart to what is, as opposed to what you're being told is, it's a never-ending rabbit hole. Because no matter how far you go in cleansing your being of incorrect, it just shows how far we are away from where we probably originated And you can go back in history and you can see in millennia where these shifts become part. And by all accounts, we are now at the point where it's reached its crescendo, and that those that have the power now over all these bankrupt governments are now they want the world to themselves. Okay, they want the world to themselves because they've had to work hard to pull themselves from the pits of hell or the Quillapothic realms and put themselves at the position of Einsof, okay, overlords. Now, because it's been such a battle and they know that we would never accept them, or normal people or moral people wouldn't accept them, just to make sure that they don't lose what they're about to gain, they want to kill everybody. They can't just go and do that because that's breaching spiritual law. They know they're going to get into some trouble. So they whisper. And they whisper in your logo from every orifice that you must do this in order to be safe from that. Everybody went with it. So they've took the it to be safe from that, only to be catching that at an alarming rate and filling the hospitals. And then by some magic, that gets inverted onto it's you that didn't play along that are now causing all this furore. And of course, if you've done the deed, you're not at full capacity anymore. Yeah, bit of a trap there, I think you've let yourself into. And so you can see it just goes on and on. Anyway, that's enough of that. This girl is great. She's a good girl, but it's a fine example of how the stepping stone off the original into this, even at this girl's level, she's still not seen that mechanic going on there, and promotes it and probably did enjoy herself, basically. This next bit's very interesting as well because she pretty much demarcates the corporate from normal policing, and she does this by speaking in terms of lots of police now are trying to avoid frontline duties because they don't want to carry out that kind of stuff. And that they want to be in the office, air conditioning. And that she's basically saying that if you don't go on frontline, you're going to lose touch with. So there's a separation. So you can see the corporate side of things is all in the office. The professional standards body that she worked for and stated that it's corporate. Again, they're changing the so they're changing the ethos of policing, and then professional standards will rubber stamp that as that's the standard. Yeah, can you see how? So the three bodies that she's worked for are corporate, and between them are pushing the entire agenda inside the policing. But she's not quite grasped that yet. But that doesn't matter. You know, she's grasped more than enough, in my opinion. So let's just hear what she has to say.
Throughout that entire time, I also did frontline duties. I took on frontline shifts so that I could maintain a connection to community.
Why would you do that? Because some I talked to off the record.
A connection to care. See, corporate and care, two different concepts.
They are running away from frontline duties and want to sit in an air-conditioned, nice little bubble.
Because if you stay in the corporate world of policing and you don't connect to the frontline policing and you see what it's like for frontline coppers and you don't see how the community responds, then how can you effectively craft policy and lead the organisation in the right direction if you don't know how the community is feeling and how the frontline police are battling to do their job?
Clear demarcation. If you're in office, you're corporate. You're not care, which is what you're supposed to be doing out on the street. Yeah? You see this. This is what's actually happened in our police service, because it's the same across the board. And later we're going to go, and I'm going to bring up the 9 principles of law. So you can see clearly what, you're going to get to the root of the problem, which you have to do if you're trying to solve any issue anywhere. You've got to get to the root of it. Otherwise, you will miss something important. Because the further you go back to the root, the more profound the essence of the change is as it pans down onto the street, kind of thing, if you get it. So it's important that you get to the root of these things. And the root of this entire nonsense is the move off the 9 principles of law enforcement. That is its root. Okay. So yeah, very important that we just analyse some of this interview in this manner, because although she puts out a lot, there's a lot that is just slightly hidden, but she's giving us the data in order we can examine it and present it in this manner also. So now she's going to determine when this shift occurred, and she's pretty plain about when this shift occurred, because when we're looking at what's going on in the world today, still a lot of people don't realise that it's like an attack. It's a full-on global attack by the banking elite against the populations. And it's, although most people are focused to the shot, etc., it's far bigger and greater than just that. This is a complete and utter takeover of every system that we've set up to run our nations. And it's been being run under bankruptcy, for decades. They've carved us up so badly. So now, just listen to what she has to say, because she's very clear. So we can see. So what I'm trying to say is, we can see that the part of this huge global thing in relation to policing is also been planned and has been carried out from the commencement of this bug.
I think that it's been growing since March 2020.
The show directives and the lockdowns.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, because the way in which we police now has completely changed, and a vast majority of the focus of policing is on show directions that are infringements on your everyday liberties and rights to just freely live in a democratic society.
Yeah, the demarcation is the corporate, as we've ascertained, is about removing your rights and liberties. At the moment, they're infringing. And the more you comply, the more that's going to move to a point of removal. And they don't intend to ever bring them back, because this is just a path to all that we've experienced, but will shift into a new title of the sunshine and rain, etc. We'll not say the word. Yeah? The sunshine and the rain change. Do you get what I'm saying? So this is just a forerunner to change the behaviour in order they can then command the same that they've gained in this time for a completely different thing altogether. But it will be so severe because it will be counting your emissions. Can you see this? Yeah, so back to what we said at the beginning. If you're not reckoning with this kind of stuff inside yourself, you're not a full shilling. You're not a full shilling at all. Okay. So I just wanted to get that across.
And I guess it's not something that any police officer, when they signed up to be a cop, ever thought that they would have to do or want to do.
Yeah, so it is completely going against the essence of perhaps why you as police joined in the first instant, So what she's going to move on further later and show that it's command level here. Now, I've bleated on about this for the last few years, and that after I got arrested, I really promoted this idea that if you're having an interaction with these people, you want to insist on duty inspector. And now they've acted contrary to that now, and you won't get to see a duty inspector. They say 7 hours when you're arrested, before you'll see a duty inspector. So they've moved a protection raft into these situations where you don't get to see the duty inspector, because they are the commanders. They're the ones issuing this pish. Now, we've also examined pretty clearly, especially in this country, that the police are synonymous with one particular secret society. Okay? And it doesn't have to be at ground level, we're talking at command level. So every command position in the police since its beginnings is interconnected with Freemasonry. Okay, Freemasonry, for the majority of the members, is about money, prestige. You with me? Success. Yeah, that's what it's about. It's a honeypot. And you're the front and the funder of this command level institution into our law enforcement, which is then going to carry out the agenda not of the nation but of the Masonic groups. So you have to tie the two together. Now, when it comes to Australia, 12 years ago we put up a report, the Alpha course, and to begin it, we put up this these writings of this guy that had died, who was very powerful in Australian politics, if I remember rightly, and they were published by his daughter. Now, I've censored the information because it's vast. It's so vast, it's quite worrying. But so much of it is sort of unintelligible if you're not savvy with occult lore and the way some of these occult operations are formed and operate, sort of the order of the toilet and stuff like that. These things have meanings, but so I took a lot out. Just left in the guts of it, but basically what he was swanking about is the fact that Australia had been completely inverted into a full satanic system as a nation, and we're being run that way. And this is going back some. And if you look at the star on the shoulder of Sergeant Krystle, you'll see that the emblem is inverted, and atop in the invert is the crown. Yeah, we've gone through the crown issue many times, that we have to make a distinction between the monarchical crown, which is what our system was set up in support of, and the inner city, the temple crown. Yeah. The crown run by the barons. Yeah. Not the monarchical. And there's been a consistent battle between the Templars and the English monarchs since the Templars were formed. They through their methods in the Crusades, took all the lands off the gentry by having them put it in trust off the crusade, and then King John and his sheriffs would support the trustee of the estate in a claim of ownership for it. We've gone through this kind of stuff. So when you look at these situations, what we're suffering today, it is because they've managed to get to this point over centuries. It's not quick, fast and new. It's just that they now reach that point where they can pull it all together. It's... So this is now the next bit where we, I think, need to be addressing this problem, and that is by the public recognising that the majority of the police are not content and comfortable in enforcing this stuff. And that needs to be a connection there between those kind of police and the public who are aware of this stuff. That's what we need to connect. We need to connect. So by nature or definition of any encounter with police, you really need, before you rhyme off into how you're going to react to them, you need to work out where these people are at. Are you dealing with a tosser, or are you dealing with a concerned male or female? Yeah, and then let's look at how you're going to behave in that situation as well. I think because we do at the moment, and we're all guilty of this. In essence, even though we're trying to do good, we are actually adding to the division. And now I'm aware of this. I'm aware of all what I do. I pretty much look at every possible reaction to what I do before I do it. Because I'm always aiming for what's best, not what's the easiest or more practical. I want the best outcome. And, that takes a lot of insight and thought before you set something going. And so we've gone along with all the videos I've done, and this is a good opportunity in order to reappraise and try and get across to people that my intention isn't to create the division, although the division's being created from every orifice at the moment, and it's a medical apartheid, let's be frank about it. So what we need to focus to as well always is how we can start pulling together, because as she's saying, you've got good coppers, you've got bad coppers, you've got good members of the public, you've got bad members of the public, you've got brain dead members of the public, you've got aware members of the public. If you're aware, there's not much you're going to be able to do for those that are unaware unless they come to you and they want to, they're ready to have a look at something alternative. You might as well just let that side of people go, because if that's where they're at, then that's where they're going to stay. You're not going to get anywhere trying to waste your energy getting them to do contrary. So let's try and reallocate our energies, as it were, to people who are receptive, people who are on board, people that are on side already, and focus more to networking in that sense. And also as well, there's a lot of going on. There's a lot of shills out there doing and sending you down paths, etc. But even so, these organisations have a lot of members, and even so. Basically, if we look at it like those that are a bit on par, sort of classes, I'm part of this group, or I'm part of that group, so I can't be your friend. If we just bypass that a little bit, and if we're all getting savvy, because the more you're attuned to the truth, and as you're seeing truth come out, you're gonna rally to it immediately anyway, by definition. If you just get rid of the editing you've got because you think you're part of that group and not part of this group, let's shed that, and let's just start pulling together. So whoever you're dealing with now, you need to first ascertain, who are these people? Are they dicks? Or are they awake? Are they human? Or not human? Are they man? Okay, male or female. I don't want to be human. Humans, look, they're all getting shotted. They're all getting jabbed up. Do we really? Does it matter? What can you do? You can't do it for the fun. Apart from, if you stop doing it, your body will eject it in a year. So if you've still got a bit of a spark going on there, you might want to hold on to that. Anyway, that's that. So now she's going to pretty much, again, as we've just looked at, she's going to show that, that even coppers are people. And outside the uniform, they have families. They're living a normal life. They earn the salary from being a police. Now, I understand, and I've always understood, that if you're going to be a policeman, you are also entering into a realm knowing full well you're never going to be able to mingle with the public as you used to do, because you'll never be trusted. And that is a fact. And it's a sacrifice, I would suggest. If you're a good person, a good copper, and you've made that sacrifice to join that, knowing full well you're not going to be able to assimilate anymore, but you're still a good egg, then that's a sacrifice. A lot of them are in there and doing, we don't give a shit, we want to badger them anyway and bully them. So they're not interested in that kind of thing. But, we have to give credence to the good and bad in everything, as it were. So here she's just going to give you an insight into that.
And that's evident in the videos. You only need to see the videos online from the various independent media, where you can see the awkwardness in the conversations that police have, the shame that they have. They don't want to be enforcing these directions. They have families that are suffering under these CHO directions, and they're suffering under these CHO directions. But until these CHO directions are appropriately contested at a relevant court of law, these police are obligated to fulfill their duties and to enact those directions.
So
So there you go. All right. Now, I've heard from judges and such that they're waiting for the correct format to be brought before them to act on it. So you can look at all these operations that are going on, that are doing it. If they're not having success, they're not doing it right. Okay, keep that in mind. But where she's incorrect is that she's claiming that police have to carry out these duties. No, you do not. Because they're not your duties. Because what she's saying in falling for the trap that if a commander says so, you have to. No. There's the 9 principles of law enforcement. They govern and dictate your oath as a constable. You cannot hold the office of constable without swearing the oath. And the oath was based in the 9 principles, which we will put up at the end. I may just speak of 2 in particular, but you need to, Because this is important. These are their duties. And what's also clear in the 9 Principles is that those duties afforded to a police constable are afforded to, it's a duty of every citizen in the service of law. We are all duty bound to ensure at all times the law is being serviced. This is just, I say it many times, our ancestors were smart cookies. But usually on the back of having gone through extreme insanity, for them to come back to the conclusion that if we let go of that, that's what happens, let's bring it back in again. So, so that's what goes on. And William and Mary, in my opinion, I know they did a lot of bad stuff, but once they woke up, or I think Mary were already woke up, they acted contrary to all that, even sacrificing their own power as monarchs. So you can see that these times, they come to this and then all of a sudden, well, we have to make sure that what is, or what was, is carried into the future for the future generations to have an idea of where they come from, what made it work. And the 9 Principles are the only principles when it comes to enforcing or servicing law, because that's the term it's using in the West, or any nation tied into England, okay? So important there that we do get that. So I hear what she's saying, but she's incorrect, because the duties incumbent on a constable are the same as what's incumbent on all citizens. Yeah, and remember your own person. But as I've said before, if that jurisdiction is just a bit beyond you, that's fine. It's not a problem. That's what England's about. Yes, it's a corporation if you wish. Yes, it's controlled, but the rights in it are afforded to you. You just have to evoke them and use them. And you get the right judges that understand this stuff, and they then have to act on that. Okay? So, yeah, she's incorrect on that particular matter. Now she gets asked why she joined. And again, very revealing in relation to how this deception has gone on for so long. It's embedded, even in a lovely lady like this. So just listen to this.
When we're talking about why you signed up for the police force and why others have signed up, let's talk about that. Why those values and those reasons for signing up that you're saying being challenged now, what were the reasons for signing up? What did you believe ICPOL stood for?
I thought that I was joining an organisation that was, about catching the bad guys that, did the wrong thing, actual criminals that committed criminal offending that we would call high harm, high impact offending. So offences against the person, ultimately.
Offences against the person. You see how embedded this whole thing, how deep this goes. The person to this young lady is the acceptable format in relation to explaining who we all are. Now, I know a lot of you struggle with this person-man thing. That's fine, but that's because you've been took off the book that would give you that knowledge. Same for me. I didn't grow up with anybody shoving anything biblical down my neck. I didn't. And I didn't want it. I weren't interested. Not interested. Weren't interested at all. It's only as I've come to educate myself that you start to grasp first that your nation was built in that. Whether you like it or not, your nation was built within that system. So if you want to understand your nation, then you better start to understand the root of it. What its footing was. What was it based on? But there again, person just shows how cemented these schisms are that have brought us to where we are today. This next bit, she's discussing how the entire thing is about being divisive, and they're specifically speaking about protesters. But it's very interesting. Again, looking for reason we're in this position is because what was lawful is now being classed as illegal. Yeah, the corporate professional standard. Yeah, just listen.
There for a while. Your boss said this.
And that's in part why I'm here, because I hate this divisive language that is being used, and I'm failing to see any leadership from Daniel Andrews, from his administration, from Lisa Neville or Shane Patton when we're talking about what's going on and these issues, and they are using divisive and maligning language about all protesters and calling protests illegal. I just think is ridiculous.
Okay? You have a right to protest under law. Okay, you can see there's just two distinct systems. And this is where we need to get down to the root of it in order to pull this back before this corporate machine has everybody resign from our state positions and puts in their own. Do you see how this works? So if we were to reference that to the Second World War, so what happened in law enforcement in Germany was at command level, in comes the Gestapo at command level and changes the entire system at command level. And then in the military, it was the SS at command. So we have our system set up as they are. They get people to a point where they're resigning and they bring in their own. And once those positions are enough, they can wholesale move in the SS in the law and, in the military, and the Gestapo into the law enforcement. Yeah? This is how they do it. It's not so much that everybody in the police become bad, but the command level all of a sudden is acting to one agenda. Yeah? And again with the military. I mean, you leave the military lads and you're encouraged to join the field lodges. This is Masonic. Yeah, it's Masonic. And, this is headed in Northern Ireland lodges, that system. Okay, you really have to get a grip of this kind of stuff. So when you leave the military, you have to start recognizing that you're no longer governed by that military. You're back in Civvy Street, but everything you've learned, all your natural instincts to defense, have to be reprogrammed in relation to what is out there in the Civvy Street as you are now a member. Where the field lodges come into play is they continuously keep you fixed to the command level in the military. Yeah, so it's not just within the military where this moving in of the SS takes effect. It then goes right down to all you guys, members of the field lodges, yeah? You've got to start to see this, fellas. Look, if you can start to grasp this, real, then everything you are, everything that you've been trained to do, can then start to work correctly. And that's the same for the police. Yeah? This is how you do. This is the only way you can unravel this machine. Because this machine has been set off in so many countries and it works. And it works because people do not understand the crack. They don't get what's going on. People like me, we do understand what's going on and we're pushing it while we have the chance to actually do something about it. And what's important about this interview with this young lady is to show us and remind us that not everybody wearing a uniform is operating in that manner. However, the ones that I've come across so far are. And they're happy to. We might be a bit more embedded with the nonsense here in the, Blighty, because, in my experience, so far, the majority of them I come up against are loving it. They're loving it. They just want to get you. They want to brownie points off their inspector. Look how many people I find today. Look, have the money. Yeah, there's far too many of them in our police for my liking, as it stands. So maybe getting this at this stage now for other nations that are not quite as embedded with chimps as we are, you might have a much better chance of avoiding some nasty stuff as this nonsense continues. Back to Frater, I can't remember his number, but I'm going to put a link up to the page at the bottom of this video, along with the 9 principles, is something very interesting was allowed to continue during the entire lockdown in Australia. Now, when you start to look at Freighter, then you start to understand why they'd allow this system to continue, because they need it. Okay? Listen to this.
I mean, he's been able to make exemptions and provisions in other circumstances. Brothels were allowed to stay open during the height of one of our blowout cases. Brothels were allowed to stay open. You explained to me how you can maintain a safe distance in one of those circumstances.
I then ask you to read the Alpha Course report that was created many years ago. If you want to understand why they would lock everybody down because it's terrifyingly contagious and allow the brothels to remain open. He explains it exceptionally well, and I'll leave that at that. Now, again, with the command level issue, here we get an insight into exactly what I was saying there, as far as this corporate machine is being pushed down onto the general copper by the command level. Interesting.
That engages in that activity is still required to justify themselves under 462A. So
is that what they're being told on the inside, though? Because I'm hearing stories of, I don't know what the right word is, but of command and higher officers like inspectors revving up the troops and telling them, you won't be held accountable. Go hard. How realistic is that? What I'm hearing?
I've heard that too from other police. I've heard a police member tell me a story that they were on a bus on the way to a protest, and
one of those driver buses full of cops.
Yes, yeah. So they were on the bus, and the police officer in charge, I don't know what rank they were, got up to give them the rev speech, about what they were going to do and what was expected of them when they got there. And he said, don't worry, any and all use of force will be justified by me. And I think that if that's true, it's an incredibly dangerous and irresponsible comment to make as a supervisor.
Yeah. But again, back to what we said earlier, it isn't your duty to act like a numpty, regardless of whether you're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're a copper, you're a soldier, whatever you may be, a civil servant, judiciary. You're supposed to be there. You've enjoyed the salary, you've enjoyed the trappings of that position for a long time. It doesn't mean all of a sudden you have to forego what is and correct and jump onto this numpty just because a commander were getting you excited. It's like, that's what you do when you go into war, a battle. So the police, from that perspective, with them orders, from the get-go, they get out of that bus doing battle. Do you know what I'm saying? They're not even doing business anymore. They're doing battle. Yeah, so if they're trying to find you, so they'll do battle and then find you. That's 2 hits. You get what I'm saying? No, it's just getting outrageous. That's all I can say. So here she covers the fact that there doesn't appear to be a separation between the corporate, or Dan Andrews, and Shane Patton, the policing chief. So again, we can see bankruptcy, that's government pushing bankruptcy policy. And as we can see with this, it would appear that the bankruptcy policy is actually now governing the police in its entirety. Okay.
Just don't know. I don't know how closely tied Shane Patton is to Dan Andrews and how that relationship works in terms of there being a separation of government and police.
It seems to be breaking down.
And it really does seem to be that relationship has become more close and more comfortable than the community should be happy with. I think that there's supposed to be that separation.
And as we get to these 9 principles, it's very clear. Policy, that's not a policing job. Public opinion isn't a policing job. The service of law is the only obligation of a police constabulary. And this is where you need to get back to, people. Because those 9 principles, are extremely important in that it also presents the relationship between the public and the police, and that is that the police are only members of the public giving full-time attention to the service of law, that the duties carried out by the police are duties incumbent on all citizens. There is no power hierarchy between the police and the public. They are even keel, unless either the police or the public breaches law. Then the one in breach becomes subject to the authority of the one who recognises, be that member of the public or the police himself. Now, in Blighty, we actually have an act that actually shows you and formalises what should happen if a copper is acting contrary and a member of the public witness it. He can arrest that copper and also get the other constables to come in and help him do that. So I think where Sergeant Krystle is coming a bit unstuck is that she's not aware of this stuff, because this is the data that you bring forward back into the mix that answers every single question she appears to still have in herself. Yeah, excellent. I mean, full marks for this girl. You know, this is what's required from everybody. So she's reaching a point now where they've created a group amongst themselves, a lot of police people that are not impressed with this nonsense. They've managed to gather a QC to the side. Queen's Counsel. Ooh. Anyway, you never know. And GoFundMe. So they're actually now getting support in all ways, and they're going to bring this before a federal court. So the girl's doing quite well. She's doing very well indeed. And the next part is just...
The only other thing that I wanted to say was that this was one of Deputy Dean's remarks within her dissenting view, and I absolutely love it. And I think that anybody who is in opposition to this statement is on the wrong side of history. And her statement was that all Australians should vigorously oppose the introduction of a system of medical apartheid and segregation.
She used that word, because I've been using those words and people saying I'm crazy.
No, she used those words. This is quoted from her dissenting opinion. And she said it is an abhorrent concept and is morally and ethically wrong and is the antithesis of our democratic way of life and everything we value.
So it's starting to be recognised, and it's starting to be picked up by people who have influence. And, you know, this idea that most have held in that there's nothing we can do really does have to be demolished. It's got to be the only thing that you demolish. And, you know, this is great that she's come about there, because as they're saying, both the interviewer and herself, that they want to bring people back together. And it is essential. It's essential. But it's essential that the police start, those that are concerned, start to let it be known to the public. Because as we said earlier, we know that, you know, in most cases, it's a bit of a sacrifice that you know you're taking when you join the police, that you're going to put yourself outside, you know, on the street society. But yeah, her calling is definitely a time to reconsider that by anybody that's aware now. Let's try and remove these sort of, I'm of this and I'm not of that. Because, as I said many times, our ancestors were smart. And they've already set in place so many things that counter this nonsense. And that's how we will move forward and start to create a force that rebuffs this absolute nonsense. You know, there's nothing we can do for those that have already succumbed. But then that's the kind of character they are. Recognise it and focus to those around you who are like-minded, those around you who also are not impressed and can see that this is incorrect protocols, on all counts by all institutions going on everywhere in the world, as it were, you know. So yeah, excellent move by this lady to try and to kick off this let's all get together kind of an attitude.